Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We got a big show this week with 3 brand new reviews that are all playing in theaters right now. This week on the show, can Ryan Gosling pull off being the fall guy, or is he still just Ken? In the new action rom-com, The Fall Guy. Years have passed, hers has not, and it's her game, her rules. Zendaya stars in Challengers. Then finally, a year in the life of a Sasquatch family in Sasquatch Sunset. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch. A roar and a burst of flame. The Movie Wire podcast. With just you need people like me. Podcast for hot and trending movies. The Wire. And here we go.
A year in the life of a unique family. A Sasquatch family, a film that captures the daily life of the Sasquatch with a level of detail that is simply unforgettable. At least that's what the synopsis reads in Sasquatch Sunset.
There's not a lot that's on record of the Sasquatch clan, so we did a little bit of research, but we came up with our own parameters, and it's sort of like a pack of Bigfoot. There is an alpha male that kind of leads them through the wilderness, and there's a female matriarch, and then a couple. There's a child and another male, the beta male, who's played by Jesse. And yeah, it's just like the story just is following them through a year in their life, kind of like a family drama, wilderness survival story.
All right, that was the most simplistic synopsis for a film that reads like a 5-year-old wrote it at the last minute, and surely wouldn't have enticed me to see this movie, except it uses the word Sasquatch, that one would think of Bigfoot. So there is a level of intrigue when you mention a mystical beast. But you know what? There isn't much to this story, so I'm surprised they got that much out of it to make a synopsis. And some might find some interest researching this movie, and if they watch the trailer, it might even spark even more interest, since the opening shot of the trailer is a couple of Sasquatches having sex. Sasquatch Sunset stars an unrecognizable Jesse Eisenberg as the main cast member that I'm sure looked good on a poster or looked good on the credits for this film. And Eisenberg, who I guess must have believed in the telling of this story because there is no explanation for any other reason to be in it. It's a role that makes him unrecognizable. There's no spoken words if I didn't watch the credits. And by the way, since it's just following a family of Sasquatch around, there's no names in the credits. I wouldn't have even known he was in this movie. I couldn't even pinpoint which Sasquatch he was, but I'm sure it looked good on a poster to have at least one recognizable name. And I'm giving a little hard time to Eisenberg, but it's not a bad thing because it is an achievement to the makeup and design of our Sasquatch. And that is one of the highlights of Sasquatch Sunrise, but it also could be its fault because it did take me a little bit of time to really piece together who was who. About the 30-minute mark, I started to get the gist of who was who, but then came the next challenge of finding out what in the actual hell was going on. And I get it. I do. I know what our filmmakers are trying to do, and based on the synopsis, I get the no dialogue, the no subtitles to understand the Sasquatch language, and our filmmakers were aiming for just a documentary-style observation picture. As somebody walking into this movie, not knowing a lot about it, it took me 30 to 40 minutes to understand who these characters were, and about the 45 to 50 minute mark to understand what was going on. This isn't smart filmmaking when it comes to such a short runtime at only an hour and 20 minutes. So half the movie, I'm following these Sasquatch walking around the woods trying to understand what was happening, and as soon as I do, we have 40 minutes of attempting to make me care about these characters that I feel like just met. Now, if these were actual animals or wildlife that the filmmakers wanted me to observe in a picture, I might have found some interest with narration. And I swear to God, for all you Sasquatch believers, if I get an email that Sasquatch is real in the subject line, I'm gonna be pissed. Now, the simplistic story, the film follows this family of Sasquatch through a year, and at times can feel like a few years, because we have very little of interest from our Bigfoot characters that really builds a stake, other than situational stakes. And without care for the characters, this remains as just that, a situational stake. Situations that tap into our natural human emotion of caring, fear, or suspense, like drowning, protection of one's family, or protecting a newborn. This is what the film taps into as a situational stake, with no emotional stake. And I did find myself caring for these situations because of the situation. But I didn't connect with our Bigfoot family. There's a scene where we have one of our Sasquatch characters get trapped and is in danger of drowning. The characters didn't have an animal instinct or evolved emotional intelligence that made the situation relevant. I cared about the situation, but the characters actually made me care less about what was happening on screen. This is where the filmmakers would have been wise to include either subtitles to our Sasquatch family or spend some time on the reactions, the animal emotional reactions of our characters. This would have solved the confusion of who is who and build an emotional stake for these Bigfoot characters. By the end of the movie, I had very little memorable moments for a movie about an unproven creature that roams the woods, with a climax that just made me say, so what? What was the point? Did we not have any ideas to lead to a proper climax? Did we run out of money? Sasquatch Sunset was directed by David Zellner, who did 2014's underrated Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, and co-director Nathan Zellner, who also stars in the movie as well. David Zellner has proven to add some heart into his characters from the past. I can feel Zellner's uncertainty throughout the movie, almost a lack of confidence, or it could even be an overconfidence, to just follow a bunch of actors in Bigfoot makeup as they play in the woods. The real problem here is that we have this creature that we've all heard of, and we want something of substance, something new to really follow these creatures around. And the only thing our filmmakers can come up with is showing us Bigfoot's penis every 15 minutes. And no, it's not humorous. If anything, this movie doesn't squash the truth about Bigfoot, but rather squashes the saying that the bigger the feet, the bigger the dick. Bigfoot's dick was very underwhelming. Maybe it's because we get it flashed and swinging every 15 minutes, and a swinging dick from Bigfoot was more interesting than the story or characters. Maybe that was our director-writer David Zellner's intention. He knew that he couldn't come up with anything interesting, so he just wrote in Bigfoot's penis every time he got stuck on what to do next with these characters. Now, let's take all the Sasquatch penis out of the mix. The movie is honestly pretty to look at. This is the biggest thing to take away from it. Even though it is a fault that nothing ever happens that stays with you, for those that just need a quiet meditation like taking a stroll through the woods, this is a movie that will relax you. It's a perfect movie to have a glass of wine, get cozy, and plan on falling asleep to. It's a white noise movie that you just need something in the background to help you sleep. But be prepared, if you wake up randomly to it, there is a high possibility that you might wake up to seeing a swinging Bigfoot penis. Sasquatch Sunset had a lot of potential but landed in the wrong creator's hands on how to execute something that should have been a lot more. It's another missed opportunity. This won't prove Bigfoot's existence, but rather prove that taking a walk in the woods or trail is more beneficial than going to this movie. I'm giving Sasquatch Sunset 2 stars.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out my reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
Revenge Gets Ripped and Love Lies Bleeding, which made me drink a pre-workout drink with no intention at all of working out to pump out 3.5 stars. One small ember can burn down everything in Monkey Man, which made me go bananas, receiving 3.5 stars. An unexpected encounter, an unlikely bond, an unforgettable adventure in a man and his dog story in Arthur the King, which made me roll over with emotion, receiving 3 stars. All right, enough animal jokes. Long Live the Fighters in Dune 2 that kept me in the theater for almost 4 hours until I gave it 3 stars. Sydney Sweeney goes from a good comedy in a bikini to Anyone But You to a bad thriller in a nun uniform in Immaculate. Jack Black is back as Poe as he faces a new threat, just without any of the fun. And skadoosh, it's a lazy cash grab in Kung Fu Panda 4, which received 1.5 stars. On the eve of World War II, one man did the impossible. Save One Life, Save the World with Anthony Hopkins in One Life, which portrayed a beam of light in a dark time in the world's history, receiving 3 stars. Then, finally, a true story of a hairdresser who rallies a community to help a widowed father save the life of his child in Ordinary Angels. That made me shed a tear and cheer, receiving 3 stars. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out this week's episode of the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's new crossover show, Back to the Balcony, where we go down to the roots of filmmaker Quentin Tarantino in Reservoir Dogs and the Siskel and Ebert reviews that followed. The link to that show will be in the description of this episode. And now, before we jump into the last set of reviews, there is a podcast I want to shout out. It's one of my weekly work listen routines to take my mind off of work, and that's with J and K over the My Work Life podcast. Make sure you listen, follow, subscribe. The link to their show will be in the description of this episode as well. But let's hear from J and K over the My Work Life podcast now.
Work sucks. Am I right, Jay?
Yeah, Kay, it does. But luckily, the F My Work Life podcast is here to help you through.
In this comedy podcast, we share memorable workplace stories through guests and listener submissions in the hopes of brightening your day, or at least leave you thinking, maybe you don't have it so bad after all.
Listen to F My Work Life on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on all the socials at FMWL Pod.
Tashi, a former tennis prodigy turned coach, turned her husband into a champion. But to overcome a losing streak, he needs to face his ex-best friend and Tashi's ex-boyfriend in Challengers.
Wait. Hi. Hey.
Tashi Duncan. She's gonna turn a whole family into millionaires. She'll have a fashion line, a foundation.
You were incredible today.
Thank you.
I mean, it wasn't even like tennis. It was an entirely different game.
Hey, come hang out with us later.
Want me to come tuck you in?
No, we can just keep talking.
How often does this happen? Going after the same girl?
Not as often as you think.
We usually have different types.
So you're saying I should be flattered?
Aren't you everybody's type?
Come here.
Which one of us? He's not in love with you.
What makes you think I want someone to be in love with me?
It's nice to see you lit up about something, even if it's my girlfriend.
Art's got his coach, Tashi Donaldson, who also is his wife.
I'm playing for both of us, Tashi. I think maybe we're disturbed by the fact that she could have been into someone like me.
When we were teenagers.
When we were teenagers. Hey, I love you.
I know. You don't know what tennis is. It's a relationship. We went somewhere really beautiful together. Let's go! I'm taking such good care of my little white boys.
I assume you planned this?
Not this part.
You know, it's become a rarity nowadays that film can engage an audience and is mere dialogue or just watching a couple of characters interact on screen, and to keep a viewer guessing and carrying on what's going to happen with our characters until the very end. Even more so, still guessing even up till after the very last shot. Challengers is now one of those rarities in movies that kept my eyes glued to the screen. And as I was walking out of the theater, it actually made me turn around in the parking lot, walk back to the theater, and buy another ticket. Challengers takes us through a time span from youth to adult of our three main characters, including the focal point of the film, Tashi, played by Zendaya, who we see as a teenage tennis pro who loses her chance at the pros when she suffers an injury. Here, Tashi has to course correct to continue what she loves. In a flashback, we see Tashi meet another set of professional youth tennis players, Art and Patrick, played by Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, who both are openly gaga for Tashi on the court and off the court. In an early scene, the two show their true friendship by hitting on Tashi and trying to get her number, with each of them being verbally okay with the outcome of who Tashi chooses. But in a key line delivered by Tashi, she says that she's no homewrecker, referring to Art and Patrick's friendship. This will be a line that will dance through your head throughout the movie as we see this chemistry and characters unfold. During this early scene where the three meet for the first time, the three make a trip to the beach, and the three of them have a discussion where the topic of tennis comes up, of course. Now, in these early scenes, this is where the film starts to show its smart strategic writing. There is so much written between the lines of what's being said within the trio of characters to give us hints of who these characters are and how their young behavior will translate into the older versions of themselves. Our skilled writer, Justin Kritzes, does this with ensuring that there is absolutely no favoritism or dislike to any of our three characters. Each character, when they are on screen during the runtime, feels neutral. Each one has an internal conflict, and Kritzes ensures that this is present during the runtime, so there is no character we are specifically rooting for, or even not rooting for. The characters in this movie are almost like eavesdropping on another person's argument, starting as a disagreement, then crescendoing into a yelling match, and you're just kind of a looking glass, not knowing the background of the argument, but you're learning as you listen. You are a neutral third party that isn't picking favorites. Challengers treats its viewer like this for the entire runtime, at least until the climax. And even during the climax, it will be completely up for interpretation. This is skilled filmmaking when it comes to character development and consistency. Our character's internal conflict is always subtly present without being in our faces and reminded every 15 minutes. We see this brilliant execution not only from the filmmakers behind the scenes, but also from the outstanding performances of Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor, which I'm gonna say this is their film. This will be their game changer for their careers. The dialogue really challenges each of these talents' range of emotions, including Zendaya, who really needed this type of movie to get her image away from the Spider-Man films or big budget movies like Dune. This is a Zendaya that we haven't seen before, and she goes after this character flawlessly. She knows how to control the dynamic of her delivery and shows she knows how to work the camera when it comes to having her mysterious feelings come across with the most subtle facial expressions. Zendaya's looks are just as powerful as her line delivery. Now, we see this across our trio of characters, and our director, Luca Guadagnino, really demonstrates his attention to detail when it comes to his character direction. We have seen this from a couple of his previous movies, such as Suspiria and 2022's Bones and All, which I gave him credit for his character direction in that film. But here, this is a whole new level of execution that he delivers without taking shortcuts. He doesn't spoon feed us the emotion. He doesn't have our characters break out and overdo their lines. He gives subtle hints to make us analyze these characters for ourselves. And his use of the camera on capturing these moments are flawless. There is very little I can nitpick when it comes to his direction and his camera work here. I can almost feel that every shot was intensely examined by Guadagnino to ensure that the film's characters show a balance of mystery, but also just enough to allow the audience to analyze these characters to see what's going to happen next or what these characters are going to do. Challengers isn't so much a good character study, but rather a great behavior study of human interaction and manipulation, with a team effort of our director Guadagnino and our writer Kritzes to really give us a taboo, intertwined story of these three characters that balance their passion on love and ask the viewer the questions. What happens when love is forced? What happens when love is taken away? Does desperation of one love outweigh another love? Or is love just a symbol to validate oneself? But the most simplistic question would be, at what lengths of manipulation does one go through to win or hold on to a bigger love that you can't let go, or one that left you? These questions bounce back and forth like a tennis ball on the tennis court throughout the movie, and it doesn't treat it like a repetitive reminder each time these questions present themselves. It feels fresh, it feels new. I was waiting to see what these characters were going to do or what the film's next flashback will reveal, and I had my fingers crossed up until the last half hour that this movie will have a proper climax that's not ruined by something cliche or generic, and it didn't disappoint. Now, Challengers does bounce back and forth between Tashi, Art's, and Patrick's journey and their relationship over the years. And just like watching a whodunit murder mystery looking for clues, about the halfway mark, I started doing the same when it comes to these characters' behavior, looking for clues to see who these characters were and trying to predict their behavior going forward and what they were going to do by the time the credits rolled. During my second watch, I got to do this from the beginning, and I found it even more interesting on the subtle behavior details this movie gives. It's never too much and it's never too little. Our filmmakers keep us on the line to give us just enough. And since each of our characters are filled with such a big internal conflict, and director Guadagnino knows this, and he doesn't want the emotion from our characters to overpower our sports competitors, because they have been taught over the years to be disciplined and almost be numb about their real feelings. This kind of information isn't spoon-fed to the viewer, but rather we get these context clues throughout the movie to understand these feelings, to understand our characters. And because we don't get a lot of emotional behaviors or performances on screen intentionally, the picture integrates some upbeat music in a form of like an 80s techno heartbeat. Now, sometimes this works, sometimes it feels forced against some of the dialogue, but it doesn't ruin the effect of the intent of what the filmmakers are trying to accomplish. The music was done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who gave me an 80s throwback to some of the music and thrillers of that decade. And at first, I wasn't really sure about the music. I kind of felt it a little bit of a distraction until I realized what this music was doing. And once the realization was there of giving a supplement of emotion that our characters are trying not to show, I found it absolutely brilliant. This is another example of music filling in the blanks to where the movie needs some emotion, but not because it lacks here, but because our characters are not to show emotion intentionally. The music in Challengers is strategically composed and strategically inserted to give us the internal sign that this is what our characters should be feeling. It works, and it is absolutely brilliant. Now, of course, just like any movie, this movie won't resonate with everybody. But to me, seeing almost every movie in theaters every week for years, I see more junk than I do brilliance. And there are weeks when I'm asked the question, have you seen anything good this week? Most of the time, I really have to think because nothing stays with me to say, you will love this movie. When I'm asked this week if I have seen anything good, this movie will come out of my mouth before the question is even finished. Challengers was an engulfing experience and a high executed journey of behavior that not only entertains, but kept me on the edge of my seat in our characters' behaviors and dialogue that I haven't felt since my first time watching 12 Angry Men. Some will go into this movie merely looking at the surface, and that's okay. There's enough here to entertain on the surface, but the movie demands to look beyond that, to really pay attention to the little details from our filmmakers and our performances, to appreciate film and the art of storytelling once again. It would be so easy to write this movie off or wait for it to hit streaming, but if you can, see it in a theater where you can see the details in our characters' facial expressions on the big screen. You can hear the integration of music from our loudspeakers. If you can see it in the theater, do it. Don't wait for streaming. Challengers is sexy, entertaining, well-crafted, well-directed, and Challengers is an example of why we go to the movies. Challengers is one of the best movies of the year, and I'm giving Challengers...
We got one!
A very strong, a very passionate 4 stars. Ryan Gosling plays a down-and-out stuntman who must find the missing star of his ex-girlfriend's blockbuster film, but ends up putting his stunt skills into action when he uncovers a criminal plot that puts his life and career in jeopardy in The Fall Guy.
In 3, 2, 1, action.
Shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling.
You are literally the last person on earth I want to see slap the shit out of you. I really could.
And I'm open to that in a safer environment.
You've been a ghost. No phone call, no text.
It's not like I didn't want to apologize.
You don't have to explain anything. It was just a flame. So how have you been? God, I hate that thumbs up stunt guy stuff. I'm the director.
We're gonna set this man on fire.
You're a stunt guy. We need to keep it super profesh.
Profesh is my middle name.
You said your middle name was Danger.
How'd we do, boss? Really?
Yeah.
Close to
Don't
that.
forget, you never saw it.
The star of the movie is missing. You need to bring him back. Save Jodie's film. You get the love of your life back.
I'm not the hero. I'm just the double.
Not today, you're not.
Tom, we only need you back on set, pal.
Dead body on ice.
He was so dead, Gail. He was super dead.
He has got himself involved with some shady people.
I had no choice. I had to do some Jason Bourne shit. They were trying to kill me. And not in a fun way. You can make it, you can make it. You hear me? It's too dangerous. Got me stairs. Go, Gail, Gail!
What happened to your face? You look terrible.
You look amazing.
You fall down, you get right back up. How far would you go for the one that you love?
Engage your core. What are you doing later? Want to go to a beach somewhere?
Drink a spicy margarita.
Make some bad decisions.
Yes.
Is he still just Ken? Can we picture Ryan Gosling without wearing pink? Or have we seen Gosling in pink for so long that it's indented into our vision of him? I had to adjust my eyes for a few minutes after seeing Ryan Gosling in pink for months after his performance in Barbie, promoting Barbie and then awards time. Seeing him in a non-colorful outfit was like waking up in the morning waiting for my eyes to adjust to the light. But after rubbing my eyes and having my eyes adjust, I realized I was in the look and feel of another comedy adventure rom-com that has the same style as we have seen time and time again, just with a much better soundtrack. Based loosely on the 1980s Lee Majors TV series by Glenn Larson about a stuntman who made extra cash on the side bounty hunting, The Fall Guy falls into a mixed message of story promises in its marketing, and at times felt like the story shouldn't have been loosely based on, but based on the TV show. Because The Fall Guy is all over the place when it comes to what it wants to be. And when it comes to the trailer, yes, the story falls in line with what the trailers show, but what I was really disappointed in was a lack of involvement or screen time from Emily Blunt, who plays Jodie, Ryan Gosling's character Colt's ex-girlfriend. And I know, I get it, of course, the movie about a stuntman should involve a focal point on the actual stuntman, but I found Gosling and Blunt's chemistry too good to not have more screen time, and the screen time we get with Blunt overpowers Gosling's performance and likability. Whenever we get Gosling on screen by himself, it's merely just a meh performance. It's a paycheck performance where he just shows up. He puts on the performance that feels like comedy is beneath him, and there's little effort in his on-screen presence. Then enter Emily Blunt, who already has an on-screen likability that puts some good timing to her dialogue and a flirtatious character portrayal. She's treating it like a rom-com, and Gosling's treating it as just an acting gig. Now, it's not that Gosling has a horrible performance, but it's just a really stale one given the material that I felt, even though not good, still deserved a little bit more from the performance. The Fall Guy was written by Drew Pearce from Iron Man 3 and Fast and the Furious Hobbs and Shaw, which took this interesting concept from the 80s show and turned it into a comedy rom-com. Now, The Fall Guy isn't the first TV adaptation to miss the mark on the original material, but it's still not as bad as the Dukes of Hazzard, but definitely not as good as 21 Jump Street. It falls in a very loose in-between, mainly because even the movie at times feels so unorganized that it doesn't even know what it wants to be. Between the action scenes, the flirting romantic scenes, to the scenes that just don't belong. It feels very structured, where director David Leitch usually has great success with the fun factor in projects like this. Seems like he didn't even know how to transition scenes. We have very stiff transitions here, but this isn't Leisha's fault entirely. The material here by Pierce is so generically stale, it felt like he cut and pasted lines from different rom-coms to different action films and put them onto paper. There is nothing fresh or new that our filmmakers bring to the table, except a soundtrack that gives us a nod to old 80s movies by adding 80s music. But unlike the music of another movie on this show, Challengers, which has a subtle music feel of the 80s, but Challengers adds it in to support the characters of the movie. The Fall Guy adds this music in to fool the viewer to an artificial good time. Because who doesn't like to rock out to 80s music when things are going boom on screen? The Fall Guy plays just like an 80s music video. I'm pretty sure we could have gotten the gist of the characters and the story in a 5-minute music video to Live It on a Prayer. Now, all that aside, films like this are trying to target a specific audience, and a lot of these movies we have seen end up on streaming platforms more often than not. And honestly, I'm pretty sure this would have gone that route if it wasn't for Gosling and his success after Barbie attached to this project. The Fall Guy is just there to merely entertain. It's brainless fun. And does it do it? Yes. But only because of the chemistry between Blunt and Gosling. This chemistry is mostly led by Blunt and the kick-ass soundtrack attached. And the strongest piece of this movie, and what the movie does have going for it, even though completely cliche, is the ending. Even with a predictable cliche final act, the climax is shot extremely well. It's exciting and has a lot of fun. And for Josh over at the Talking Smack podcast, this is what I was talking about. This is a scene where holding out for a hero should have been utilized. This is the type of movie where the final act almost makes it worth sitting through the rest of the movie, because the climax should have been what the rest of the movie was, which is almost pay homage to films of the 80s with completely unbelievable stunts that make me shrug my shoulders, but also say, so what? It's unbelievable, it's uncanny, it's totally ridiculous, but I don't care because it's fun. And that's what the filmmakers are intending, is to give us something that is fun. This is what the movie should have been, not wait to the last 30 minutes. What the missing element for me was in Fall Guy was the little to no fun it had with itself. Leach's movies are usually over the top to really shoot for that fun factor. We have this movie that centers around a stuntman shooting a movie, the Hollywood politics with producers, and there is no real fun to be had with itself. It doesn't poke fun at itself, and it really does kind of teeter around the humor of it, but it doesn't go all in on the jokes. For a movie about a Hollywood stuntman that's in love with a Hollywood director that gets wrapped in a murder mystery, how could this movie not have fun with itself? The only one that seems to get in is our producer character Gail, played by Ted Lasso's Hannah Waddingham, who goes over the top with her role, and it fits. Her portrayal works here, and the other should have followed her lead. The Fall Guy seems exciting and fun on the surface, and don't get me wrong, it does have its moments, but really doesn't show me anything that I haven't seen before in an action rom-com, other than cliches and a nice rounded soundtrack. But for its target audience that know what they're getting, some may have fun with this movie. Me, I clocked my fun time at about 25 minutes in total out of its entire runtime. But I will say this, when it's having fun, it is a fun ride. But it's not enough for a full recommendation. I'm giving The Fall Guy 2.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet, make sure you check out the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony. Now, one last message before we leave. Next week, it is a slow movie week, so we will do a streaming week next week with films that you may have already seen or films that are about to come out. That's available just for streaming. Can't wait for that show. Can't wait till next week. So make sure you tune in. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson. He thanks you for listening to the show. You can follow Justin on Instagram and Twitter at Movie Wire Show, or visit his website, www.themoviewire.com. Oh, and don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we will see you at the movies.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.